Scheiße ich immer, Alter.
Greetings from Noob. Today we found ourselves on Surf Vestige. Making a guide on this map was suggested to me by Jake Janke. And I didn't know the map at all, so I first had to look it up. Found it was a tier 4 that only had like 270 comps. But then I also saw that the map was fairly new, so I thought, well, it's probably not that terribly difficult. Later.
No wonder this map is only like 200 comps. It's fucking impossible.
So yeah, it turns out the map is actually somewhat challenging, but it's mostly for one specific reason. It's a very hazardous map. This type of map is very common across pretty much the entire skill range of Surf, and I made a number of guides on maps like this recently, for example RuneWorlds 2 LOD, which honestly is way worse than Vestige. The way I define a hazardous map is, number one, it's linear. Number two, it's probably quite long. Not necessarily. Vestige, for example, isn't long, but most of them are long. And three, it has many minor obstacles and checks that add up over the duration of the map. Stuff like angle, trajectory, timing checks, slightly awkward boards and transitions, some head surfs, b-hops, gap surfs, minor unit checks, basically the map finding out if you really messed up, or minor tech checks like some simple spinny drop. So hazardous maps are neither really unit nor tech. They kind of combine elements of both, but the main idea is really to have countless little challenges, neither of which is very difficult in itself, but the sheer number and sequence of them creates a map that is far more difficult than the sum of its parts, and essentially contains a million different ways to fail. The way to beat a hazardous map is consistency, because it's basically just probabilities. If you have a high or even medium chance to fail on a handful of its challenges, your chance of actually comping the map are near zero. But if you can beat most challenges with near certainty, the difficulty of the map drops dramatically. The way to achieve that consistency is tenacity, practice, memorization, and therefore, first and foremost, save locking. When I learned Vestige, I did it in the tried and tested way of save locking to the end and then going backwards, at least sort of. And during that save locking, the main thing that I paid attention to was what are safe ways, high probability ways to beat the various sections. So I'm really not interested in the ideal way, in the best way, or even the correct way. I want to know the way that has a high probability of success, even if the run is already a bit scuffed. For the jump into the end zone, for example, I found that hilariously mooning it is much safer than trying to be precise, so that's what I did for my first comp. Another thing I'm really interested in during save locking is what is and isn't essential to beat the map. So let's go through some of those things for Vestige. The first thing that is pretty much essential is getting a lot of vertical speed downwards from the first head surf. On the ramp at the bottom, you want to go pretty low and leave it ideally a bit earlier than I'm doing it here. What isn't essential is boarding this ramp over the spine. It's probably better, but it's not essential. On this head surf, it's really important to basically stay very careful and parallel with it and then get the correct timing downwards. From this ramp, you have to jump up very strongly. You can overdo it, but generally it's better to go higher than lower. After this ramp, you kind of have to make a quick decision whether it's safer to go wide or direct to the next ramp. Here I go wide. And this transition here is the hardest part. It's also a bit of a unit check. What really matters is to board the ramp as early as possible, so you have as much space as possible on the ramp to convert your unit, so you don't have to like turn into the ramp too much, basically. For the second half of the map, I found that it had really wide margins of error, and I didn't reach it very often in my actual runs, maybe 4-5 times, but I comped the map twice. So basically, I had a really high chance of success on the second half of the map, but a really low chance of success on the first half. And that's partially probably just because the second half is easier, but it's also because of how I save locked it. Basically, I save locked the second half so much that whenever I reached it, I had a really high chance of success.
Let me just actually save lock this.
Okay. I did save lock the first half too, and quite a lot, but eventually I just kind of gave up and accepted that I would fail this over and over and over again. And in a way, that's not that bad because, well, it's the part of the map where failing it in a way matters less, and also it's a part of the map that you practice passively when you're going for actual comps. So in that sense, save locking it is less important. What you're seeing now is my second comp, and it's basically the same thing, just surfed more ambitiously, more aggressively, and with a little bit more practice behind it. Ultimately, I think what helps the most with hazardous maps is just understanding that this is the type of map you're dealing with. It's not really tech, it's not really unit, it's not really smooth surf. It asks a lot when it comes to consistency and practice and just the overall approach, but it asks a lot less when it comes to most of the other areas that typically define skill in surf. I didn't focus too much on the actual walkthrough. I just thought this idea about hazardous maps was a little more interesting and maybe even more helpful. Let me know what you think about it, and until next time, see ya.